All right, good morning. Today we're going to talk about the functions of bones. And I think most people are familiar with the fact that bones like protect and support our body, but they actually do way more than that. So we're thinking of a bone, it's just like this dead, empty thing, but it's not. So much more going on inside of here. And I set this up kind of like a guessing game, which will work very well since you're watching a video instead of talking to me. But pause the video, try to figure out what this is describing. Hopefully, you came up with Anchor and Anchorage, Alaska. One thing that bones do is provide a spot for skeletal muscles to attach to. So, skeletal muscles are anchored to bones. This is important because then muscles are able to use them like levers for movement. So if we didn't have bones, muscles would not have a place to attach, and then we couldn't move. Here's the next one. That big lake is a reservoir. The cheese should be making you think of calcium, and the matches of phosphorus. So bones store all of those things. They store about 90% of the body's calcium and phosphorus, and also like trace amounts of magnesium. And they also store growth factor, so like the cell signal that causes cell division to occur. And to illustrate this, let's compare the normal bone on the left side there. It looks kind of like a honeycomb. And then that bone on the right side has osteoporosis. So notice that it's lost a lot of bone mass. And you've probably all heard like you need to drink calcium when you're young or else you'll be at a higher risk of getting osteoporosis. That is true because some of the mass of bone is constantly made up of the minerals. Oh, another weird thing. The bones don't just store the minerals, like they constantly release them into the bloodstream as the body needs it. So if the body is low on calcium, it will actually break down bones, release the calcium. And then when you go eat calcium, then it like puts it back in. So it's not just sitting there, it's like a constant like give and take. Okay, this one, notice the pillars. Pillars provide support for the upper structure. So, another function of bone, being able to provide support. And what I mean by that is like think about Ollie's dancing skeleton, like their lower limbs. Our lower limbs provide support to the trunk of our body because it holds it weight. It holds our weight. It lets us stand. This image is a sideways view of the chest cavity. And so like right here, that's the sac around the heart. And then those tubes right there, that would be the lungs. So the lung has been removed, but it would be filling up this whole space, and that's your diaphragm. This yellow thing is your spinal cord, and then we have like the ribs coming around the back and connecting to the front. This is called your thoracic wall, and the rib cage supports your thoracic wall. Like it gives it a place to be able to connect to, which helps our lungs be able to inflate. That is blood. Did you know that bones are responsible for producing your blood cells? Specifically red blood cells. That is called hematopoiesis. Say it with me, hematopoiesis. It means producing red blood cells. Inside of your bones, you have bone marrow, and you might have heard of this before. There's like yellow bone marrow and red bone marrow. The red bone marrow is the part that actually makes your red blood cells. Or if you've ever heard of somebody needing a bone marrow transplant, this is what they'd be talking about. In adults, in the adult skeleton, we have limited places where our cells are still actively dividing. You've probably heard of the places where they do bone marrow transplants from, like the head of the femur, that's your big thigh bone, the hip bones, and then also the head of the humerus, like your arm bone. So when I say head, I mean like kind of the top bulgy part right there. So places of actively dividing blood cells. Also, derivatives are turning into white blood cells and platelets, other components of blood. That's a very cute fat cat. And that is butter, which is also a lipid or a fat. So bones store fats. The technical term for fat is triglyceride. It's like a glycerol with fatty acid chains hanging down. And this is the yellow bone marrow. So if you're someone who likes to eat bone marrow, you're eating your stored triglycerides. And this is kind of like the mineral storage where it doesn't stay there, it's released into the bloodstream as needed. So to be able, if you were kidnapped or something horrible and you were being starved, your body would be able to start breaking down the bones, well, releasing the fat stored in the bones to be able to feed you. And this one, I'm sorry, but I am perpetuating the stereotype that teenagers can be a bit hormonal. Did you know that your bones actually create hormones? Like normally when we think of hormones, we think of the pituitary gland and the thyroid, but bones do it as well. Bones produce the hormone osteocalcin, and osteocalcin is important for actually being able to regulate insulin. You might have heard of insulin before. It's a hormone that's produced by your pancreas, and it regulates carbohydrate metabolism. So like people who don't have enough insulin would be diabetic, where they have a hard time being able to break down carbohydrates, and that is actually tied into this bone hormone osteocalcin. In this one, there's a knight, there's a hand that is protecting a leaf, and data protection on your computer. This is the one we probably all know. Bones do provide protection. Bones are hard to be able to absorb pressure when we're hit. For example, the skull bone protects the brain, the vertebra protect the spinal cord, and the ribs are able to protect our thorax, which contains like your heart and your ribs. So, lots of important things. Please let me know what questions you have.